Welcome to another episode of AutoMundial, the weekly car news and review show where this week we have everything from hot hatches to supercars.
We take a look at the newest Mercedes G-Class and we pore over some of our favourite concept cars. All that is still to come. First though,
Ferrari has become the latest outfit to resume production at two of its Italian factories in Maranello and Modena. The Monza SP2, 812 and F8 Tributo are among the first vehicles to be rolled off the production line after a 7-week hiatus as a consequence of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Under the Back on Track programme, a number of cars which were only hours away from completion prior to the processing suspension were finally finished, first of which a Monza SP2 with a striking black and grey livery. A GTS Spider and F8 Tributo were to follow, all of which are now ready to be delivered to their eager owners in Australia and Germany respectively, where the prancing horses will eventually stretch their legs and hit the road.
There have been some great fast forwards in recent years. Over in North America, we've loved the latest Mustangs and the GT supercar. While here in Europe, we've been equally impressed with the wonderful Fiesta ST and the now deceased Focus RS. But while plans for an RS version of the current Focus are now on hold, Ford has treated us with a more traditional hot hatch, the Focus ST. Rather than an all-wheel drive mega hatch like the RS, the ST has its sights set on toppling its front-wheel drive rivals, namely the Hyundai i30N and the Renault Megane RS. With so many great cars in this class then, the ST needs to continue the current fast-forward trend. To ensure the ST's performance credentials, Ford has packed it full of some very clever tech. It gets an anti-lag system which keeps the turbo spooled up for instant throttle response and acceleration, and it's certainly effective, helping the 276 brake horsepower 2.3 litre engine propel the car to 62 miles per hour in 5.7 seconds. Then there's the adaptive dampers and electronically controlled limited slip diff, helping to keep the Focus flat and neat through corners, while the rev matching system allows for racing driver downshifts with minimal effort. It even has launch control and a whole load of other performance goodies. There are two chunky exhaust tips poking out of the special rear bumper, while the lowered suspension and Pilot's sport-clad alloys complete the hot hatch look. Elsewhere, the steering response has been sharpened, and the dampers have been firmed up, although the ride remains almost as supple as in the standard car, a great achievement considering how firm its rivals are. There's plenty of grip, allowing you to really make the most of the quick steering and the brilliant differential. It hooks in and pulls you round, but be wary not to rely on it too much. If you head into a corner too fast, it will start to come undone, and you'll feel the torque steer dragging you away from an apex. The engine lacks the character of the playful chassis, but it's a big motor with plenty of grunt and a satisfying soundtrack too, with plenty of pops and bangs when you put the car into its most hardcore setting. Inside the cabin, it's business as usual, with a standard Focus dashboard lifted with some fantastic Recaro seats. There are endless creature comforts too, like a heated steering wheel, B&O sound system and an 8-inch infotainment screen with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. It even gets a shed load of safety kit too, including autonomous emergency braking, evasive steering assist and lane assist, making this a brilliantly usable everyday car.
But how does it compare to this, the cheaper Hyundai i30N? It may be the Korean brand's first foray into the world of performance cars, but boy, have they done a good job here. Based on the practical but boring i30, the newly formed N division has transformed the humble hatchback into a class-leading hot hatch. Its interior is a little plain compared with the Fords, but Hyundai has really gone to town on the exterior styling. It's far from being as in-your-face as a Civic Type R, but the sporty body kit and purposeful rear wing really mark this out as something a bit special. Get it out for a drive and it doesn't disappoint. Go for the optional performance pack and you get 271 brake horsepower, meaning 0 to 62 in 6.1 seconds. Not quite as quick as the Ford Focus, but it's not quite as expensive. It sounds good too, and the chassis is every bit as responsive and intuitive as the STs. It does feel a bit more serious though. Where the Focus has clearly been engineered to be fun, the i30 feels altogether more grown up.
We like our hot hatches to be a giggle though, and the Ford Focus ST is just that. It's a car you can hustle along a country lane, enjoying the loud exhaust and brilliant handling, and then settle down for a comfortable motorway cruise. It nails the hot hatch criteria then. It does everything a normal Focus does, but it can still get your heart racing.
In a world full of copy and paste SUVs, the Mercedes G-Class is a refreshing reminder of what 4x4s used to look like. Since its introduction as a military vehicle 40 years ago, the silhouette has barely changed, but incredibly, this is the latest model and it's all new. It may look nearly identical to every other G-Wagon, but apart from the door handles and spare wheel cover, every part of this old school off-roader has been changed. Earlier this year we featured the AMG tuned G63, a loud, brash and unhinged version with a 577 horsepower V8. But today we're looking at this, the much more sedate G350D, a sensible-ish diesel version designed for comfort and ability rather than showing off around the posh parts of town.
It does still look the part though. It does without the huge alloys and side exit exhausts, but its chrome grille and subtler looks still manage to turn heads. Where the G63 looks like a cartoon car with its body kit, the diesel looks much more like a traditional Geländewagen. The narrower alloys give it a slimmer stance, while the higher profile tyres mark it out as a proper off-roader. Inside though, it's every bit the luxury SUV. In fact, there are few vehicles this side of a Range Rover that offer quite so much equipment. It almost feels like an S-Class as you surround yourself with fine leather and brushed aluminium. It gets the familiar dual-screen infotainment system found throughout the Mercedes range. It's operated via a central click wheel that works brilliantly once you remember to stop trying to press buttons on the screen. It takes some getting used to, especially if you're using Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. The whole cabin feels ultra high quality though. The materials are all first class, as is the optional Burmeister audio system, which looks as good as it sounds. What's really remarkable though is the fit and finish. The G-Class is hand-built in Austria, but there are no creaks and rattles like you find in other handmade cars. Instead, the loudest thing in the cabin is the slight wind noise, something to be expected in a car with the aerodynamic properties of a brick. Powering the G350D is a 3-litre straight-six producing 282 brake horsepower and all the torque you could ever want. That said, it doesn't feel quick, especially when compared to the fire-breathing AMG version, but it can reach 62 miles per hour in 7.4 seconds and tops out at 124. With 600 Newton meters of torque to play with, the 350 never feels like it's running out of puff. It can happily tow up to 3.5 tons, helped by the configurable driving modes. On the motorway, it rides as well as an S-Class. It's almost as quiet and it can do 500 miles on one tank. It's a hugely impressive everyday car then, but it's not without its drawbacks. For starters, it's expensive. Really expensive. It may be over £50,000 less than the AMG, but it still costs as much as a well-spec'd Range Rover, and that is hard to justify.
The Range Rover is even more refined than the Mercedes, and just as well trimmed and equipped. It's also available with hybrid power and does without the try-hard image of the G-Class. It's just as good off-road too. The G-Wagon is famed for its all-terrain ability, but the Range Rover's specialised driving modes will see it through almost anything you can throw at it.
What the Rangy doesn't get though is the G-Wagon's character. Few SUVs come with such a sense of occasion, with every trip turned into an event, even with the diesel motor. It's an extremely likeable car, but one you buy with your heart, not your head.
After the break, an Aston Martin estate car and the Nissan GT-R NISMO. Still to come, Japan's greatest supercar. But first,
with new car releases few and far between at the moment, we've taken some time recently to look back over the last decade at some of our favourite concept cars. From the radical to the ridiculous, this week we're checking out some of 2013's craziest creations.
and we kick things off with something that no one was expecting, the beguiling Ferrari Sergio. While it did technically enter extremely limited production, the Sergio was to all intents and purposes a concept car, with little to nothing in the way of practicality or value for money. Sculpted by the legendary Italian design house Pininfarina, the Sergio was named after Sergio Pininfarina, who had sadly passed away in 2012. Under Sergio's leadership, the company designed countless Ferraris, so a 458 Italia was chosen as the base car for this tribute. With many of the curves inspired by the classic Ferrari Dino, the Sergio was even more elegant than a 458, showing off more jaw-dropping details each time you looked at it.
But Pininfarina wasn't the only Italian design house showing off a modified version of a production car. Bertone had a go too with the sensational Aston Martin Rapide Bertone Jet 2+2. A bit of a mouthful, but the Jet was perhaps the most desirable estate car ever made. Designed to celebrate Aston's centenary, Bertone was commissioned to make a more practical Rapide by an anonymous Aston collector. Inspired by former Aston CEO David Brown's DB5 shooting brake, it went on to cause quite a stir when it was debuted at the Geneva Motor Show. In fact, it was so popular that Bertone planned to put it into small-scale production before it sadly went into receivership. Under the bonnet, it used the familiar Aston Martin 6-litre V12 producing 476 brake horsepower, hitting 62 miles per hour from rest in around 5.5 seconds. If those figures sound familiar, that's because Bertone didn't touch the drivetrain, instead saying that we just tailor the suit.
And there was yet another Italian styling house showing off a new model in 2013. This is the Ital designed Guigiaro Parcour, an off-road supercar that we want quite badly. Looking like some sort of futuristic Lancia Stratos, the Parcour was more than just a jacked-up Lamborghini Gallardo, although it did use the same platform. It actually featured some proper off-road tech, with specialised driving modes and more ground clearance than a contemporary Land Rover Defender. Sitting behind the cabin was a 542 brake horsepower Lamborghini V10, making this the mother of all SUVs. And we'll have more concept cars after this.
Believe it or not, it's been 12 years since we first saw the Nissan GT-R. It blew us away with its monstrous performance, grip and value. It was 911 turbo performance for half the price. Since then though, there have been 2 more generations of Porsche 911, but the GT-R is still going.
Constant fettling and updates have now peaked at this, the 600 brake horsepower Nissan GT-R NISMO, the fastest, most powerful and expensive production GT-R to date. So can it really remain competitive against today's cutting-edge supercars, or is it a dated relic that needs to be put to rest? Well, the styling is definitely starting to feel its age. While the car has had various facelifts throughout its 12-year production run, there's no getting away from the fact that it is a big old brute against the current trend of small, delicate supercars. It's a lot bolder than the standard car though. NISMO, Nissan's performance division, has added plenty of carbon fibre aero bits. The front splitter and rear wing aid downforce, while the vents in the front wings bellow heat out of the engine bay and send it down the car's flanks to the rear wing. It gets bigger brakes too, a set of 410mm carbon ceramics, the biggest brakes ever fitted to a Japanese car. Every inch of the car is covered in weight-saving trickery, even the tyres. Their contact patch has been increased by 11% and have been more rounded to generate even more grip in the corners. The suspension has all been reworked, enabling the GT-R to hide its bulk completely, making it feel as agile and focused as any Ferrari or McLaren. Its automatic gearbox and twin turbocharged V6 suggest it should feel like a big GT car, but it feels super alert and on its toes. The old NISMO felt like the pinnacle of what the GT-R was capable of, but the subtle tweaks and carbon ceramic brakes have transformed this new one. There's less understeer, sharper turn-in and even less turbo lag. The paddle shifts have been made even faster too, although it's hard to believe it's quicker than the astonishingly clever auto mode. It can uncannily predict what your right foot is about to do, to the point that it becomes a real challenge to try to catch it out. The ride is still just as back-breakingly firm as before, but this car is not designed to be comfortable. Step inside the cabin though, and this doesn't feel like some stripped-out racer. It still gets all the mod cons you'll find in a regular GT-R, with some of the most cutting-edge tech nestled within the now rather dated dashboard.
Being a Nissan, there are a few questionable buttons that seem to have made their way out of a Qashqai, and the once futuristic infotainment graphics now look a little old hat. But it gets everything you need. Climate control, Recaro bucket seats, a boost gauge, you know, all the essentials. It also gets a shed load of NISMO badges, reminding you that you're sitting in something really rather special. It even keeps all 4 seats, something you won't find in this, the other GT-R from Mercedes. Like the Nissan, the Mercedes is an already quick car turned up to 11. But while it's also front-engined, like the NISMO, the Mercedes is rear-wheel drive, giving it an extra dose of leery oversteer when you prod the throttle pedal. It's not exactly cheap, but neither is the Nissan. There's a hefty premium to pay for all the NISMO nests, but unlike its German counterparts, which are all sold out, this is not a limited edition car. Everything comes as standard too. There are no options and only 3 colours to choose from. We'll take ours in Storm White.
And now we're heading back to 2013 with more of our favourite concept cars. But while the cars we've featured so far have shown off timeless Italian class and style, this is one Italian designed car that is perhaps a little more, shall we say, left field. This is the Soleil Anadi GT. And yes, this actually happened. Look past the weird paint and the dodgy alloys, and underneath you'll find a good-looking reinterpretation of the C6 Chevrolet Corvette. Thankfully, the interior was a little more tasteful, with some nice wood and leather additions to the reworked Corvette interior. But it wasn't just the styling that was tweaked. The 6.2-litre V8 also had some work done with power, boosted to 651 horsepower thanks to a huge supercharger. The 0 to 62 time was dropped to just 3.1 seconds on its way up to a top speed of 202. Interestingly, the Anadi was homologated for road use, although we're unsure how many, if any, the Italian coach builders actually sold. Something that did go on to sell in production form though was this, the 2013 Lexus LF-LC concept. The original inspiration for the superb LC 500, this concept was a real statement of intent for Lexus. Following on from the all-conquering LFA supercar of 2011, the LF-LC was designed to be a more mainstream and more profitable GT car with just as much presence as the V10 LFA. Revealed at the Detroit Auto Show, the big Lexus caught everyone's attention with its long bonnet and now familiar enormous front grille. The LED rear lights were inspired by afterburners from an F-22 fighter jet, while the interior was styled to rival anything from Aston Martin or Porsche. It was so well received that the LC went on to hit production in 2017, with many of the concept's details still in place. It's available with very similar huge wheels, while the overall shape is almost identical, right down to the side intakes and futuristic taillights.
Join us again next week on AutoMundial as we check out 2 convertible supercars.